This is Gail Morgan welcoming you to the Libertarian Counterpoint. Now, your host, James Just.
And thank you for joining us today. With me is John Cameron and Mr. Richard Field. Gentlemen, we've had a bit of Bitcoin controversy going on this last week. Elon Musk and the banking industry, I suppose, are arguing over the environmental impact of Bitcoin, which is kind of a strange argument to have. What do you think about this?
It's not so much, well, it's the banking industry, but it's more the establishment and more the government itself. The government is scared stiff about the ascendance of Bitcoin. The reason they're scared stiff is because government control of fiat currency is 90% of what allows them to control everything else. Governments don't want to give up control, therefore they don't want to give up control of the currency, namely the dollar in the US, the euro in Europe, and the yuan in China, and so on. No country will willingly and without a fight give up control of the currency. It's that important to them. It allows them to inflate as much as they want as a stealth way of essentially raising taxes. So it's very, very important to governments to stomp down not only Bitcoin but also gold or any other commodity or thing that would be a replacement for fiat currency. The first thing that the government did to stomp down on Bitcoin was claim it's only used in crime, only used for laundering funds, etc. That was goofy and wrong. I mean, it is used for that, but so is cash. Cash is used a hell of a lot more than Bitcoin in illegal for money laundering. And of course, government wants to get rid of cash too, but that's another story.
I was going to talk about that. The government's idea of getting rid of cash so that every single transaction, as long as they can keep it in dollars and not Bitcoin or Doge or the rest of that, appears in somebody's bank account and can be tracked, and therefore they can tax it more easily. So I think we're just seeing this. Yeah, that's a
different rabbit hole, but a very legitimate one. So the second thing that but Bitcoin kept going up. All of the scare stories about Bitcoin being a mafia tool or whatever, Bitcoin has continued to go up and got about $60,000 per coin recently. So now the next scare story, and this has been circulating on the interwebs for about a month or two, is that Bitcoin uses all kinds of energy in the mining process. It uses more energy than the country of Sweden. My God, we have to stop Bitcoin because it's an energy waster. It'll pollute the atmosphere with greenhouse gas, et cetera, et cetera. And nobody actually sat down to do the comparison of what the banks do in terms of energy consumption and what, for that matter, gold does in terms of energy consumption until recently, when somebody did a little bit of rudimentary research and found out that the banking system uses 536 times more energy than Bitcoin mining. Even gold mining uses 141 times more energy than Bitcoin mining. And if you want to translate that into greenhouse gases, banks contribute 471 times more to greenhouse gases than does Bitcoin, and gold mining contributes 107 times more to greenhouse gases than does Bitcoin. So it's another red flag. The powers that be. I mean, we're already in a point in history where the dollar is about to lose its supremacy based on historical precedents. It takes about 50 years for a fiat currency to run the course from being the new accepted international currency to being inflated to oblivion. We saw that with the British pound. We saw that with in historical times with the Roman coins, silver coins. We saw that with the Netherlands. We saw that with Spanish gold when gold was being mined in the New World, and Spain inflated their money supply by having ready access to gold. There's an historical cycle. The currencies never last all that long. The dollar's time is essentially up, and the United States government is trying to delay or trying to whistle past the graveyard against dollar supremacy as long as they possibly can. And scare stories about it using too much energy are just that, just that, scare stories and nothing more.
Well, and then to add to what Richard said, there's a couple of facts that there's only about 1/8 of the total bitcoins possible left to be mined. So once those are mined, its energy usage will be simply transactional costs, which will put it on the order of Lowe's or maybe less than Home Depot. So
yeah, it would be
it's a problem that will go away. Whereas the energy use of banks, especially as they print spurious, phony reports on how solid they are based upon holding fiat currency, it will continue. So even if it is, and it's my understanding that what is about half the energy used by Bitcoin people, because they're all techies, they're concerned about the environment, and they're starting to use solar and wind and all sorts of stuff to power the mining. So it's kind of a moot point. I mean, if you look at
electricity costs money, and all those mining equipments, it costs a lot to run. So if they're running they're going to run the most energy efficient cards and energy efficient equipment they can. It's simply
and it's the Bitcoin industry, not the banking industry, that is going to places like Denmark to use geothermal energy, which is essentially cost free. It's the Bitcoin industry that's going to, or miners that are going to using a flare off from wasted gas. In oil fields in North Dakota and Texas and elsewhere, gas is often flared off because it's not economic to use it, to transport it to market. There are companies right now specializing in taking that otherwise to be flared off natural gas and using it to power Bitcoin mining. There's a whole sub-industry involved in figuring out how to mine Bitcoin a lot more inexpensively than is currently the case. You can't say that about Goldman Sachs or about J.P. Morgan Chase.
Now, the most they do is send their workers to work from home. I think that's about the most they do to save some energy. We'll send their workers home to save some energy. So, let's move on about something else that's about kind of strange ongoings this last week. The Pentagon has released more videos and more discussions about UFOs. I know, John, you spent some time down the UFO rabbit hole apparently this weekend.
Well, no, it was today, unfortunately, because I clicked on. I don't know if people want to know how the show works. We exchange links so we can do some research on stuff, and the UFOs were in the 40s and 50s. About half the people in the country, publicly and without shame, believed that UFOs were real. They didn't know what they were, but there were so many sightings by so many reputable people, fighter pilots coming back from World War II, scientists, all the rest of that it was pretty much an accepted fact that UFOs existed and somebody was looking into them. And then the government decided, our government, the government, and other governments decided that, the idea, especially our government, that the people of America at the height of the Cold War wouldn't have confidence in this country if the government couldn't have a very clear explanation about what these things were. So they put a policy in place to ridicule people for these sightings, and forced pilots to stop reporting them, and on and on and on. At the same time, creating an official government program a little bit later, the Blue Book, whose job was not to find out about UFOs, but to make sure that nobody who spotted something reputable actually that they were ridiculed. And it's gotten to the point where the Soviet Union and a bunch of other countries opened up all of their information on UFOs quite a while ago. All of their stuff is open. And despite people, even senators, people, assistant directors of defense, and all the rest of that, saying, I want to look at all the information that the United States government has on UFOs. They can't look at it, which is kind of strange. So now the Pentagon says it's going to release all the information it has at a date in the future. But they've said they're going to do this over and over and over again, and never have. So it either there's a bunch of possible explanations. Occam's razor, if you know the government, is that they don't really want people to know how incompetent that they are and see all the money they've wasted on all these basically propaganda programs. But the second reason is that there's something there. And, whether it's, aliens or whatever, but there have been so many reputable sightings by people over the years that I would think it would behoove any government that's interested in protecting its people, or any major think tank, to think, well, if these phenomena can show up on radar and do these things, then it means that we might be able to figure out how to do that. So why don't we investigate them so we can reverse engineer what they're doing to have interstellar flight or to fly to the moon or whatever. So, and then while I'm on the soapbox, the other part to this is that my brother, the brilliant, very quietly spoken man that he is, when I was discussing what I thought was a government conspiracy a while back, he said, John, think about this. You met people who work for the government, right? And I said, yeah, I didn't quite know where he was going. He said, so do you think any of them can keep a blanking secret? And my answer to that was no. So I'm torn. And part of me thinks that there's been so much information reported that there's obviously something there, and the other part of me thinks that the government can possibly keep a secret. And then I came to another conclusion that it actually sort of makes sense, which is government is just so bad and inept and compartmentalized and favor-ridden and corrupt and all the rest of that, ours especially. We're making, Central African dictatorships look like open countries, that there's probably something there, but the people in charge of it have no idea where it is. And that's why when people ask, can I look at your files? They go, oh, yeah. And then they don't produce them, not because they don't want to produce them, but because they lost them, because they work for the government. I mean, anybody thinks I'm wrong about that, just file for unemployment in the state of California.
It's in some box in some warehouse somewhere, and nobody knows where it is anymore.
That's where, or if there's an actual alien, member of Congress, and nobody knows because all those guys are too drunk and trying to get set up with hookers all the time, so they don't even bother to look. I mean, it's just, who knows? But I think, to talk myself in a complete circle, I don't know if there's anything there, but all the reports would lead me to think that somebody should investigate it objectively to see if there is anything there. It might not be UFOs. It might be transdimensional stuff. Most of the universe is dark matter. We know nothing about that. Maybe that's dark matter sliding through. I mean, who knows what it is? But if we're wasting the kind of money we're wasting, paying people more money to sit at home so the government can remain in power than they would get if they actually went back to work. Let's just take a fraction of that and investigate all this stuff, see if there's anything there.
My 2 cents worth is on UFOs is this. If we think, given the vastness of the universe, that humans are the only species which has developed any kind of intelligence or method of travel or any of that, then that's the ultimate of hubris. I suspect very strongly that there is something out there that we don't know about that may have superior intelligence to what we do, but there's no way of knowing unless they identify themselves to us, and they may not think it's worth the trouble. Thank you.
Or we might even see it as being worth it. And I'll second what Richard said. I mean, when everybody says UFOs, they always think aliens. But that doesn't necessarily have to mean aliens. That's a whole different discussion. They're all the, when the big thinkers, the numbers people, astrophysicists and scientists who observe the universe, look at our planet and the planets they've recently discovered that are in the Goldilocks zone, and they come up with a number of civilizations, a number of planets supporting life in our galaxy alone, at the most pessimistic, upwards of 1 million. And if you think that, if you just crunch the numbers down, there's no way that we are alone, as Richard said, in this universe. Whether, and people say, well, they couldn't get to us, could take 1,000 years. Back in 1999, physicists have proven the impossible, that it is faster. It is possible for things to travel faster than the speed of light. And anybody who's watched Stargate Universe knows you don't need a spaceship to get around anyway. So, yeah.
Well, these things, they're not necessarily aliens. I still bet the fact that this is some government program that, the military doesn't actually know about. And so the military sees these things flying around. What they're seeing is some secret government, program building ships that can go in the ocean and the sky. It's just, it seems to be the most logical answer to me. But speaking of logic, Washington Post has now pointed out that our politics is not as divisive now as it has always been, despite the fact that they've been telling us that for the last 4 years. They're pointing out that, in the past, our politics has been just as divisive as they are now. We're just as mean to each other as we were before, and it's all fine.
Yeah, well, that's not as far-fetched as it seems. I mean, back in the 19th century, there were people who were having fisticuffs on the floor of the Senate or the House. I forget which. Alexander Hamilton, and killed somebody in a duel.
Aaron Burr.
Aaron Burr. Yeah, it's the revolutionary, the post-revolutionary war politics were every bit as dicey and mean-spirited and hard-hitting as anything we have today. I think the one thing that is different about today's politics is that it's turned into a winner-take-all. We have grown the government to such a great extent that the government has so much pervasive control over the wealth of the country that if you have control of the government, you have control of the wealth, and everybody is fighting for that control. That's why we're seeing such dramatic us versus them, why there is no bipartisanship to speak of anymore. It's because everybody wants to be the one who controls the gravy train.
Well, and to add on, I didn't interrupt you, did I, Richard? To add on to that, the growth in, I don't want to scare people away by calling it the deep state. The untouchable bureaucracies that are a result of the growth in government have power that is that kings of ancient countries would want to have. They're untouchable due to qualified immunity and all the rest of that. You can't fire the people, and they pretty much control all of that wealth that passes through their fingers. And so when you have one of the major players, because you basically have three parties, and they're all the same. You have Republicans, Democrats, and the bureaucracies. And I think the bureaucracies actually have more power than either the Republicans or Democrats or both of them combined. And because that part of the world is untouchable, you have to focus on these little shouting matches that you have between the parties that are, pretend like they're different, but they're not. And I think that people have gotten to the point where they believe that there's no way to change that. There's a huge level of frustration in this country over the power that all these agencies have over their lives. And if you believe that you're powerless, that's when you are most frustrated in life. And when you're most frustrated in life, that's when you get the angriest. So I think there's an added player that has more power than especially in the past.
Yeah, well, not necessarily than in the past. I mean, if you look at Kafka and the I forget what civilization that was, but the bureaucracy ruled there. If you look at Rome. It was the bureaucracy that controlled a whole lot of what was going on during the Roman Empire period. If you look at any country in Europe, it's the bureaucracy that
No, I
has been
agree
doing
that
things for a very long time. Bureaucracies have a tendency to predominate in all phases of history after a period of time.
Well, and I absolutely agree with you, Richard. But now the bureaucracy controls 90% of the money because 90% passes through the government. All of it, if you count the R.S. So, in the past, like in Italy, when I was there last century, I won't say when last century, there were companies that employed 1,000 people that weren't on the books anywhere because the bureaucracy was so Kafkaesque that people just decided not to deal with it. And, that's why the underground economy is so huge because, trying to get a permit to replace your water heater that you can do yourself, but you'll go to jail if you do it and you're caught, is so Byzantine and bizarre and Kafka. Throw all the verbiage at it. But because it's so omnipresent and controls so much wealth versus what it controlled in the past you could kind of ignore it, but now it's omnipresent, and that's why it's frustrating.
Well, I think that's part of the point. Is
talk about something else.
Well, I think the government used to be so far away. It used to be 1,000 miles away, 100 miles away. It took months to get information, and now it's quite literally at your front door. You can't get away from it.
It's inside my computer. I mean, it's just
Yeah, there's no way.
I do anything interesting enough to need them to be inside my computer.
You can run, you can't hide, but you can't run fast enough.
No.
Yeah, which brings us back to AB5 is still continuing to wreak havoc on our economy, and they want to take it national with the PRO Act. It's, independent workers. At a time when workers have all the power, they have no flexibility because of California's AB5. Instead of wanting to say, hey, I want to work there on Tuesday, over there on Wednesday, and I want to make this decision every week, we have California who's decided that schedules have to be printed out 2 weeks in advance. And so you've actually taken the power away from the individual worker at a time when individual workers have more power than they've had in a long time. It's this whole concept. Yeah. This whole concept that AB5 was protecting workers is just mind-boggling to me.
Well, no, and
if you take a look at any bill, the title of the bill is almost always the exact opposite of what the bill will actually accomplish. And so if it's protect the workers bill, you can be pretty well guaranteed that it's going to screw the workers one way or another.
Oh, absolutely. And especially in this, the stated goal of these things and the real goal of these things, or just like one of the tax entities in the state of California is called the Board of Equalization. And if you think about it, the reason it's called the Board of Equalization is because they want to flatten out wealth in the state, and they are actually ballsy enough, probably can't say that on the air, to call themselves what they are. They're to take money from one pot and give it to another pot, scrub as much off as they can in the middle, and give it to their favorite friends. But most government organizations don't have that kind of courage. I mean, the war on drugs.
I'm not sure it was courage. I suspect that was accidental. But
yeah, you think it was accidental? Well, yeah, because then you'd be giving a government employee credit for being intelligent. And there are some. I mean, the politicians, some of them are brilliant. But no, it's a mess. And anytime the government steps in, or the governments, I think I should always say that, step in and try to fix something, A, there's a hidden agenda, and B, they're going to screw it up worse than it already is, and C, we're going to be worse off after they supposedly try to fix it when they're actually trying to make it worse.
And we're going to pay for it.
When they start. And we're going to pay for it, and the people who are employed to do this new stuff are going to be employed forever, and retired rich, and there's no way to fire them. So it's a little frustrating. Yeah.
Yeah, they interfere in a economy that they have no knowledge of. They tell people who work on these businesses, who have deliberately designed their lives to be freelancers, to be gig workers, because they don't want to be employees, they don't want to be tied down. And then you have a bunch of people with a union mindset, kind of a show up, clock in, punch your time and go home mindset, and they want to impose that on gig workers and freelancers who are a completely different type of people. And why our legislature isn't sophisticated enough to understand that, hey, we have to
So, James, are we not going to talk about the Ministry of Truth?
Oh, you want to talk about YouTube's Ministry of Truth?
No. I want to talk about a small subsidiary of one of the FANG stocks. That's what I want to talk about, which has set itself up as the Ministry of Truth.
Hey, well, sure thing.
Okay.
Go, Richard, go.
The Ministry of Truth has told us at varying times. Back in March of last year, 2020, it said masks are not necessary. In April of 2020, it said masks are essential as a disease-fighting mechanism. In May of 2021, they said, well, masks are not essential as long as you're vaccinated. Back in April of 2020, it was the Ministry of Truth, or the government agency, the authoritarian agency, which is being promoted by the Ministry of Truth, said that it is not possible for you to test for disease unless that test has been approved by us beforehand. In fact, I had to wait many, many months in order to get tested. And the Ministry of Truth is now saying that it used to say that outdoor transmission of
COVID.
No, you can't say that word. Outside transmission of
Voldemort.
Fluvid.
Outside transmission of particulate matter was a huge contributor to disease. Now the Ministry of Truth is saying, oh no, it's not actually. It's only about 1 or 2% of the transmission. The whole thing is, we are listening to a Ministry of Truth say that you have to obey the authorities, and the authorities have, on the record, been consistently wrong.
Can we say that the Ministry of Truth is wrong? I don't think we can say that. Well, as long as we call it the Ministry of Truth.
The Ministry of Truth is saying you have to believe the government agency. And that's the authoritarian government agency. They're always right, except they change their mind at every opportunity. And I haven't even gotten into the prevalence of how the disease spreads or doesn't, or how many will die from it.
It's hard to quote the Ministry of Truth when the Ministry of Truth changes their sayings every 3 months. And so now you can go get in trouble for something you said 3 months ago, which was perfectly acceptable, and now is not.
And the Ministry of Truth has a platform which says, unless you agree with our version of truth, you're off the platform.
Yeah, and it's a growing
and the
problem.
reason the Ministry of Truth is doing this is because they know that the FANG stock, which depends upon government approval and government lack of regulation, is going to get regulated like hell unless the Ministry of Truth reflects what the government agencies are saying. It's a cluster F.
It's a censorship by the back door, and just like the clock, we are out of time. Thank you all for watching. You can go to libertariancounterpoint.com to find out all our show prep. And please remember to love everybody.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.